The spring dawn broke quietly over Kansas City's Brookside neighborhood on Easter Sunday, 2022. Pastel decorations adorned front porches, families prepared for church services, and children anticipated egg hunts later that morning. But inside one craftsman-style home on a tree-lined street, a horror beyond comprehension had already unfolded. At 6:42 a.m., the Emergency Dispatch Center B received a frantic call from a teenage boy whose trembling voice painted a picture of terror. An intruder had invaded his home. His parents lay dead upstairs. He'd hidden in his closet, paralyzed by fear, waiting for the killer to leave. What began as a routine home invasion investigation would transform within 48 hours into one of the most calculated cases of parricide Missouri had ever witnessed. This is the story of how detectives pieced together a puzzle so disturbing that it would challenge everything they thought they knew about juvenile crime. Officer Rebecca Chen's patrol car was the first to arrive at the Westerfield residence, her tires screeching slightly as she pulled to the curb. Her partner, Officer Mark Thompson, was already radioing for backup as they approached the house with weapons drawn. The Easter wreath on the front door and the cheerful bunny decorations seemed grotesque in the context of the emergency call they'd received. Inside, they found a 14-year-old boy sitting on the bottom stair, his head buried in his hands, rocking slightly. His name was Justin Westerfield. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, and when he looked up at the officers, his expression appeared to be one of shock and terror. "Upstairs," he managed to whisper. "They're both upstairs." Officer Chen moved toward the staircase while Thompson stayed with the boy, wrapping a shock blanket around his shoulders. The teenager's story tumbled out in fragments. He'd been awakened by strange sounds, heard his parents screaming, hidden in his closet out of fear. When silence fell, he'd emerged to discover both his mother and father had been shot. Chen climbed the stairs slowly, her service weapon extended, clearing each corner. The master bedroom door stood ajar. Inside, she found James and Emily Westerfield lying in their bed, surrounded by crimson-soaked sheets. The scene was brutal and efficient. James had been shot in the head, likely dying instantly. Emily had a chest wound, her hand frozen in a defensive position. What struck Chen immediately was the precision of it all. This wasn't the chaotic aftermath of a violent struggle. The bodies were still in bed. No signs of a fight, no furniture overturned, just two people who had been executed while they slept. When Chen recognized James Westerfield as a fellow officer from the Kansas City Police Department, she had to step outside momentarily. Her hands shook as she radioed in, her voice breaking as she confirmed the worst: one of their own had fallen. By mid-morning, the Westerfield home had transformed into a hive of activity. Crime scene technicians moved through the house like ghosts in white Tyvek suits, photographing, measuring, collecting. Outside, a growing crowd of police officers gathered behind the yellow tape, many with tears streaming down their faces. James Westerfield had been universally loved, a dedicated cop who'd spent 13 years building trust in the community. Detective Ryan Anderson arrived at 7:22 a.m. A 15-year veteran of homicide, Anderson had seen his share of brutal crime scenes. But this one was different. This one was personal. He'd known James Westerfield, had worked several cases with him over the years. The thought of solving his colleague's murder weighed heavily as he ducked under the crime scene tape. His first priority was interviewing the sole witness, the victim's son. Anderson found Justin sitting in a patrol car, still wrapped in the shock blanket, sipping water that someone had provided. The detective's approach was gentle, fatherly even. The boy had just lost both parents in a horrific way, or so it seemed. "Justin, I know this is incredibly difficult," Anderson began, settling into the seat beside him. "But I need you to walk me through everything you remember, okay? Take your time." The teenager's account was detailed and seemingly straightforward. He'd gone to bed around 10 the previous night. His parents had still been awake, watching television downstairs. Sometime around 5 in the morning, he'd heard sounds. Maybe the back door opening. Definitely footsteps. He'd been scared, had hidden in his closet. Then came the gunshots. 2 of them, maybe seconds apart. He'd stayed hidden for what felt like hours but was probably only about an hour and a half, terrified the intruder might find him. Anderson listened carefully, taking notes, watching the boy's body language. Something nagged at him, though he couldn't quite put his finger on it yet. Justin seemed appropriately shaken, but there were these odd moments where his distress seemed to switch on and off, like a light. When officers walked past, the boy's face would crumple with grief. When he thought no one was watching, his expression went blank. There was something else too, a linguistic detail that stuck in Anderson's mind. When describing his parents, Justin had used past tense. My dad was a police officer. My mom was a social worker. But at that point, no one had officially confirmed to him that both parents were dead. How did he know with such certainty? Crime scene technician Sofia Rodriguez worked methodically through the Westerfield home, documenting everything with the precision of a surgeon. She'd been doing this job for 12 years, and her eye for detail had cracked more than one case wide open. The kitchen was her first area of concern. Justin claimed the intruder had entered through the back door, possibly breaking in. But the door was intact. No damage to the lock. No scratches on the frame. The deadbolt was engaged from the inside. The alarm system showed no breaches. Not a single window in the house had been disturbed. Rodriguez moved to the master bedroom next, where the body still lay awaiting the medical examiner. She studied the blood spatter patterns, the positioning, the trajectory of the shots. Both victims had been shot from the foot of the bed, approximately 5 feet away. The angle suggested someone standing at full height, not crouching or moving quickly. This was a person who'd had time to take aim. The murder weapon, a hunting rifle, lay on the floor near the foot of the bed. It belonged to James Westerfield, kept in a locked gun cabinet downstairs in the den. Rodriguez examined the cabinet carefully. It had been opened with a key, not forced. The lock showed no signs of tampering. This is when her trained eye caught something critical. Inside the cabinet, among several boxes of ammunition, one stood out. It was completely empty, the only one in the collection that didn't have at least a few rounds remaining. She removed it carefully, noting the manufacturer and caliber. When she looked closer, she found something crumpled at the bottom, a sales receipt. The date on the receipt made her pulse quicken. March 17th, 2022, just 3 weeks earlier. The name on the credit card slip read James Westerfield, but the signature looked wrong. Rodriguez had seen enough forged signatures to recognize one. She bagged the evidence, her mind already racing ahead to what this might mean. While Rodriguez processed the physical evidence, Detective Sandra Martinez was assigned to examine Justin's electronic devices. The teenager had asked repeatedly about his phone, seeming more concerned about retrieving it than about the funeral arrangements for his parents. That alone struck Martinez as odd. Working with digital forensic specialist Aidan Morris, Martinez began the painstaking process of extracting data from Justin's smartphone and laptop. What they discovered in the first few hours was chilling. The search history painted a disturbing picture. Starting about 2 months before the murders, Justin had been researching topics that made Martinez's blood run cold. How to make a fake ID. Perfect murder planning. Can minors inherit money if parents die? What is the best time to commit murder without witnesses? How long does a body stay warm after death? The searches weren't random late-night curiosity. They were systematic, progressive, building on each other. Justin had researched sleep cycles, learning when humans experience their deepest sleep. He'd looked up inheritance laws in Missouri. He'd studied techniques for staging crime scenes. But perhaps most damning was a document Morris recovered from Justin's cloud storage. Titled Future Plans, it contained a detailed timeline. Call police 60 to 90 minutes after ensuring no pulse. Act shocked and traumatized during interviews. Stay with grandparents for a maximum of 2 weeks. Push for control of assets through a lawyer. Move to a Plaza District condominium before the new school year. This wasn't the digital footprint of a grieving son. This was the blueprint of a calculated killer. Detective Anderson reconvened his team that afternoon in a conference room at the precinct. The evidence they'd gathered in just a few hours was already pointing in a direction no one wanted to acknowledge, toward the victim's own son. "Walk me through the ammunition box again," Anderson said to Rodriguez. She pulled up photos on the conference room screen. Found in James Westerfield's gun cabinet. Only empty box among several. Receipt at the bottom, dated March 17th. The signature doesn't match exemplars of Officer Westerfield's handwriting. "What do we know about that date?" Anderson asked. Martinez consulted her notes. James Westerfield was working the afternoon shift that day. He clocked in at 2 p.m., didn't leave until 11 that night. There's no way he made this purchase. Anderson leaned back in his chair, staring at the receipt on the screen. 3 weeks of planning. That's what this suggested. Whoever bought that ammunition had been preparing for these murders for nearly a month. "Let's pull security footage from the store," Anderson decided, "and get exemplars of Justin's handwriting. I want to compare them to this signature." The team worked through the night, driven by the combination of professional duty and personal grief. Many of them had known James Westerfield. The thought that his own son might be responsible was almost too painful to contemplate, but the evidence was leading them inexorably toward that conclusion. The next morning, Anderson and Martinez drove to Heartland Hunting Supplies, a sporting goods store located about 3 miles from the Westerfield home. The owner, Victor Ramirez, met them at the door, his face grave. He'd already heard about Officer Westerfield's death through the law enforcement network. "We need to see your security footage from March 17th, Anderson explained. Ramirez led them to his back office, where he pulled up the digital files. "We keep 30 days as standard practice. What time are you looking for?" "The receipt shows 4:27 p.m., Martinez said. Ramirez fast-forwarded through the footage. The cameras captured the ammunition aisle from multiple angles. At 4:22 p.m., a figure entered the frame. A young male wearing a Kansas City Royals baseball cap pulled low and an oversized jacket. "Freeze that," Anderson said, leaning closer to the screen. Even with the cap obscuring part of his face, the resemblance to Justin Westerfield was unmistakable. The detectives watched as the figure browsed the fishing section first, apparently killing time, watching the registers. When the store's manager stepped away for a break, leaving only a young clerk at the counter, the figure approached the ammunition display. He was waiting for the right moment, Martinez observed, watching for when someone inexperienced was working the register. The footage showed the young male selecting a box of ammunition, then approaching the counter. The clerk checked his ID, appeared to accept it, and processed the transaction. The entire exchange took less than 3 minutes. "Do you have a copy of the ID that was presented?" Anderson asked. Ramirez nodded, pulling up a digital file. "Our policy is to scan all IDs for ammunition purchases." What appeared on the screen made both detectives lean in closer. It was a Missouri driver's license with James Westerfield's name, but the photograph had been altered. It showed someone who looked like a younger version of James, but when Anderson pulled up a recent school photo of Justin on his phone, the similarities were impossible to ignore. This was their smoking gun, concrete proof that Justin Westerfield had planned these murders weeks in advance, going so far as to create a sophisticated fake ID to purchase the ammunition he would use to kill his parents. By the afternoon of the second day, the investigation had pivoted completely. What had begun as a hunt for an unknown home invader had become a focused examination of the victim's only child. Anderson knew they needed more than circumstantial evidence to arrest a 14-year-old for the murder of his parents, but every new piece of evidence added to an increasingly damning picture. The forensic analysis of the fake ID revealed that it had been created using photo editing software and printed on high-quality paper. Justin had taken a photo of his own driver's license, his father's actual license, and digitally altered his own photograph to appear older, adding subtle aging around the eyes and a hint of stubble along the jaw. For someone with no professional training, it was remarkably sophisticated, but there were mistakes too, the kind of mistakes that suggested an adolescent mind at work. Justin had used his father's credit card for the purchase, apparently believing that no one would check the statement before he could intercept it. He'd hidden the murder weapon in its original location, perhaps thinking that returning it to the gun cabinet would suggest an intruder had replaced it. He'd kept the receipt in the ammunition box, a careless oversight that would prove fatal to his entire plan. Anderson's team discovered that Justin had even conducted a practice run 2 days before the ammunition purchase. Security footage from a sporting goods store in neighboring Independence showed him successfully buying expensive sneakers using the fake ID and his father's credit card. He'd been testing the system, building his confidence before attempting the more suspicious ammunition purchase. The sneakers were found still in their box, hidden in Justin's closet. The receipt was tucked inside. He'd never worn them. They'd been purely a trial run for murder. The breakthrough that would ultimately seal Justin's fate came from an unexpected source. K-9 units brought in to search the property for any additional evidence had picked up a scent beneath the backyard shed. Handlers watched as the cadaver dog, trained to detect decomposition, alerted to a specific area of disturbed earth. Crime scene technicians carefully excavated the spot, finding a waterproof container buried about 2 inches below the surface. Inside was a journal, Justin's journal, containing entries that would send chills through even the most hardened investigators. The entries were dated, starting from early February. They began with frustrated rants about his parents' rules, their refusal to increase his allowance, their insistence on knowing his whereabouts. But the tone shifted quickly from complaint to calculation. February 18th. Researched inheritance law today. If both die, everything goes to me. House worth about $320,000. Life insurance probably $500,000 minimum. Maybe more. That's enough to live how I want. Need to think about the details. February 24th. Dad keeps his hunting rifle in the den cabinet. Uses a key. Need to get a copy made without him knowing. Checked online. Hardware store can duplicate keys while you wait. Just need to borrow his key ring when he's in the shower. March 3rd. Successfully copied the gun cabinet key. He didn't notice. Tested it when they were both at work. Lock opens perfectly. The rifle is there, clean and loaded. But I'll need the right ammunition, the kind that won't leave them alive. March 10th. Practicing making a fake ID. Found tutorials online. Need to age my face to look like I could be Dad. Baseball cap will help. His jacket will make me look bigger. Going to try buying something random first to see if it works. The entries continued, growing more detailed, more chilling. Justin had written multiple drafts of what he would tell police, refining his story with each iteration. Intruder narrative version 1. I heard breaking glass. Hid under my bed. Heard 2 shots. Too scared to come out. Intruder narrative version 2. I was in the bathroom. Heard my parents yelling, then gunshots. Locked myself in and waited. Intruder narrative version 3. I was asleep, but heard a noise downstairs around 5 a.m. I hid in my closet and heard 2 gunshots. I was too scared to come out until I was sure they were gone around 6:30. I didn't see their face. They might have been wearing a mask. Reading these entries, Anderson felt a cold fury building in his chest. This wasn't a crime of passion or a tragic accident. This was premeditated murder, planned over weeks, refined and rehearsed. And the victims had been loving parents whose only crime was trying to provide structure and guidance to their teenage son. As the investigation deepened, a picture emerged of a family under typical adolescent strain, but nothing that would suggest the violence to come. Friends and colleagues of James and Emily Westerfield described them as dedicated, loving parents who'd set reasonable boundaries for their son. Emily's colleague, Dana Mitchell, recalled recent conversations about Justin. Emily was concerned that he'd been pushing back against their rules. Wanted to go to unsupervised parties with older kids. Wanted his allowance increased from $25 to $100 a week. She said they were trying to balance giving him independence with keeping him safe. James's partner, Officer Thomas Reynolds, remembered James mentioning that they'd recently caught Justin lying about his whereabouts one weekend. They took away his phone privileges except for schoolwork. Justin apparently erupted, screamed that they were ruining his life, that he hated them. James was shaken by it, said he'd never seen that kind of rage from his son before. But the real motive became clear when investigators examined the financial angle. Justin had been obsessed with money and status. His social media showed him following luxury lifestyle accounts, browsing expensive condos, and making promises to online friends about throwing lavish parties once his trust fund kicked in. In private messages to people he'd never met in person, Justin had created an elaborate fantasy. He portrayed himself as the son of wealthy parents who gave him unlimited freedom and resources. "My parents are going on a long trip soon," he'd written 3 weeks before the murders. "I'll have the house to myself. Going to throw the biggest party Kansas City has ever seen." He'd researched the value of his parents' assets obsessively. Screenshots found on his computer showed he'd photographed his father's financial statements. The combined value of the life insurance, home equity, and retirement accounts totaled approximately $1.5 million, a fortune to a 14-year-old with expensive tastes and a growing resentment toward the parents who wouldn't fund his desired lifestyle. To Justin, his parents weren't people. They were obstacles between him and the life he felt he deserved. The solution, in his adolescent calculation, was simple and brutal. Remove the obstacles. 48 hours after the murders, Detective Anderson sat in his unmarked car outside the home of Martha and Richard Barnett, Emily Westerfield's parents. Justin had been staying with them since the murders, cocooned in their grief and their determination to protect their grandson from suspicion. This was going to be the hardest conversation of Anderson's career. He was about to tell grieving grandparents that their grandson, the only family they had left, had murdered their daughter. Martha Barnett answered the door, her eyes red from crying. When she saw Anderson's expression, her face went pale. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." "Mrs. Barnett, Mr. Barnett," Anderson said gently. "I need to speak with Justin. We have evidence that we need to discuss with him at the station." "What kind of evidence?" Richard Barnett demanded, appearing behind his wife. Justin was the victim here. He lost both his parents. Anderson took a deep breath. "Sir, we've discovered that the ammunition used in the murders was purchased 3 weeks ago by someone using a fake ID bearing your son-in-law's name. We have security footage showing Justin making that purchase." Martha Barnett's legs gave out. She collapsed against the doorframe, and her husband barely caught her in time. The sound that came from her throat was something between a wail and a moan. The noise of someone experiencing a grief so profound, it had no adequate expression. When Justin appeared in the hallway behind his grandparents, Anderson watched the teenager's face carefully. There was no shock, no denial, no desperate proclamations of innocence, just a calculating look, followed by a simple question. "Can I bring my phone?" "No," Anderson replied. "Let's go." The interrogation room at Kansas City Police Headquarters was deliberately austere. Concrete walls, metal table, uncomfortable plastic chairs, harsh fluorescent lighting. It was designed to be psychologically uncomfortable, to break down resistance, to extract truth. Detective Anderson and Detective Martinez settled across from Justin Westerfield, setting up the recording equipment that would capture everything said in the coming hours. The teenager looked small in the oversized chair, his youthful features at odds with the serious charges he was about to face. "Justin," Anderson began, his tone conversational, almost friendly. "Let's start by talking about your parents. Tell me about your relationship with them." For the first few hours, Justin maintained his witness story. He spoke about his parents in glowing terms: dedicated public servants, loving caregivers, people who wanted the best for him. His responses were smooth, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed exactly what a grieving son should say. But Anderson and Martinez were patient. They let Justin talk, watching for inconsistencies, building rapport, waiting for the right moment to introduce the evidence they'd gathered. That moment came 3 hours into the interrogation. Anderson placed a sealed evidence bag on the table between them. "Do you recognize this?" Justin glanced at the empty ammunition box. A micro-expression flickered across his face. Fear, quickly suppressed. Looks like ammunition for my dad's rifle. Anderson opened the bag and removed the crumpled receipt. This ammunition was purchased on March 17th at Heartland Hunting Supplies. Your father was working that day. He couldn't have made this purchase. Maybe he sent someone else, Justin suggested. But the confidence had drained from his voice. Martinez leaned forward. We have security footage, Justin. From the store. Would you like to see it? The detectives played the enhanced video on a laptop. Justin watched himself enter the frame, browse the fishing section, wait for the right moment, approach the ammunition counter. When the footage ended, he sat in silence for nearly 4 minutes. I want to call my grandparents, he finally said. But before Anderson could respond, Martinez placed photocopied pages from Justin's journal on the table. We found this buried in your backyard. These are your words, Justin. Your plans. Multiple drafts of the lies you plan to tell us. Justin stared at the pages, and something fundamental shifted in his demeanor. The mask of the grieving son cracked and fell away, revealing something cold underneath. You don't know what it was like, he said, his voice taking on an edge of indignation. Living with them. My dad was a cop, so he had all these rules, always checking my phone, always demanding to know where I was. My mom was even worse, analyzing everything I said with her social worker psychology. I couldn't breathe in that house. As the hours wore on, Justin's justifications poured out. They wouldn't let him go to Cancun for spring break. They limited his allowance to $25 a week when everyone else at his school got hundreds. They checked his grades online every single day. They wanted him home by 11 on weekends. To the detectives, these were normal, reasonable parental boundaries. To Justin, they were intolerable restrictions that justified murder. Did you kill your parents? Anderson finally asked directly, 9 hours into the interrogation. Justin looked at him for a long moment. If they had just given me some freedom, none of this would have happened. It's kind of their fault, if you think about it. The confession, when it came, was chilling in its clinical detachment. Justin described the murders as if recounting the steps of a science experiment. I waited until early morning because that's when sleep is deepest. I researched that, he explained. Dad always slept on the right side of the bed, closer to the door. I shot him first because he was the bigger threat. He was stronger, had police training. Martinez fought to keep her expression neutral as Justin continued, her hands clenched beneath the table. Mom woke up when I shot him. She looked at me and said, Justin, no. But I had already decided I had to do both of them, or the plan wouldn't work. Why did you wait over an hour before calling 911? Anderson asked. Justin's answer was delivered without apparent emotion. I read that sometimes people can survive gunshot wounds if they get help right away. So I wanted to make absolutely sure they were dead before calling anyone. I sat in the hallway and played games on my phone while I waited. Then I practiced my scared voice before I made the call. The detectives exchanged glances. In 20 years of homicide investigations, Anderson had never encountered such complete emotional disconnection in someone so young. This teenager had watched his mother bleed out, had deliberately delayed help to ensure her death, had then calmly rehearsed his emotional performance before calling for help. What happens to their money now? Justin asked as the interrogation was winding down. Do I still get it, or does it go to my grandparents? Even after confessing to murdering his parents, his primary concern was still the financial inheritance. That final question, captured on the recording, would later become the most damning evidence of Justin's true motivations. On April 10th, 2022, Detective Anderson returned to the Juvenile Detention Center where Justin had been held for the past 3 days. This time, he carried formal charges. Justin Westerfield, you are under arrest for the murders of James Westerfield and Emily Westerfield, Anderson stated. reading him his Miranda rights while juvenile corrections officers looked on. Justin's response was telling. "Can I have my phone back now?" Not an expression of remorse or grief. Not a proclamation of innocence. Just a question about when he could reclaim his device. When informed that he was being charged as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree murder, Justin showed his first sign of genuine emotion. Not grief, but irritation. "That's not fair," he muttered under his breath. The decision to charge Justin as an adult despite his age was based largely on the evidence of premeditation. The ammunition purchase 3 weeks before the murders, the fake ID creation, the journal with its multiple drafts of alibis, all of this demonstrated a level of planning that Missouri law recognized as sufficient for adult prosecution in extraordinary circumstances. As the investigation concluded, and prosecutors prepared for trial, detectives assembled a comprehensive timeline of Justin's descent from frustrated teenager to calculated killer. Early February 2022. Justin begins researching inheritance laws and murder methods online. He discovers that if both parents die, their assets, totaling approximately $1.5 million, would pass to him. February 24th. Justin secretly duplicates the key to his father's gun cabinet while James is in the shower. He tests the key when both parents are at work, confirming he can access the hunting rifle. February 28th. Justin photographs his father's driver's license, beginning the process of creating a fake ID. March 10th to 15th. Justin creates the fake ID using photo editing software, aging his own image to pass as his father. He conducts a practice run at a sporting goods store in Independence, successfully purchasing expensive sneakers using the fake credentials. March 17th. Justin enters Heartland Hunting Supplies at 4:22 p.m., wearing his father's jacket and baseball cap. He purchases ammunition specifically designed for maximum lethality, using the fake ID to pass the age verification. Late March. Justin drafts multiple versions of his post-murder alibi in a journal, which he buries in a waterproof container beneath the backyard shed. He refines his story repeatedly, settling on the home invasion narrative. April 8th to 9th. Justin's parents discover vape pens in his room and ground him for 2 weeks. This punishment is still in effect over Easter weekend, potentially serving as the final trigger for murders that were already extensively planned. April 10th, 5:30 a.m. Justin retrieves the hunting rifle from the locked cabinet using his duplicated key. He loads it with the ammunition purchased 3 weeks earlier. He enters his parents' bedroom and stands at the foot of their bed, watching them sleep for several minutes. 5:35 a.m. Justin shoots his father in the head at close range, killing him instantly. His mother wakes at the sound. She sees her son holding the rifle and cries out, "Justin, no!" He fires a second shot, striking her in the chest. 5:35 to 6:42 a.m. Justin waits in the hallway, deliberately delaying calling for help to ensure both parents die from their wounds. He plays games on his phone. He rehearses his scared voice and frightened demeanor. 6:42 a.m. Justin calls 911, reporting a home invasion. His performance is convincing enough to initially fool responding officers. 6:47 to 7:30 a.m. First responders arrive. Justin maintains his witness story, wrapped in a shock blanket, apparently traumatized. 7:30 a.m. 12 p.m. Crime scene investigation begins uncovering inconsistencies. No forced entry, no stolen items, no security system breaches. Detective Anderson begins to suspect the home invasion narrative is false. 12 to 5 p.m. Discovery of the empty ammunition box with the receipt dated 3 weeks earlier becomes the breakthrough that shifts the investigation's focus to Justin. April 11th. Security footage from Heartland Hunting Supplies confirms Justin made the ammunition purchase using a fake ID. Digital forensics reveals his extensive research into murder methods and inheritance laws. April 12th. K9 units discover Justin's journal buried beneath the backyard shed, providing written evidence of his planning and premeditation. April 12th to 13th. Justin undergoes a 12-hour interrogation, eventually confessing to the murders in clinical detail. April 13th. Justin is formally arrested and charged as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecution's case against Justin Westerfield rested on multiple pillars of evidence, each reinforcing the others to create an unassailable narrative of premeditated murder. Physical evidence: the empty ammunition box with the March 17th receipt, the hunting rifle with Justin's fingerprints, gunshot residue on Justin's hands and clothing, the fake ID used to purchase ammunition, the sneakers from the practice purchase run, never worn, still in their box. Digital evidence: internet search history spanning 2 months showing research into murder methods, inheritance laws, and ID forgery. The future plans document detailing his post-murder timeline, screenshots of his father's financial statements, social media messages promising lavish parties and claiming access to significant wealth. Deleted browsing history recovered from school library computers showing additional research into ID creation. Documentary evidence: Justin's journal with multiple drafts of his alibi story. Notes about his parents' sleep schedules and the creaky floorboards to avoid. Observations about when his father cleaned his rifle and where he stored the gun cabinet key. Video evidence: security footage from Heartland Hunting Supplies showing Justin's ammunition purchase. Security footage from the independent sporting goods store showing his practice run. Body camera footage from Officer Chen showing Justin's initial statements and demeanor. Interrogation video capturing his confession and disturbing lack of remorse. Witness testimony: store clerk Braden Murphy describing the suspicious ammunition purchase, school counselor Margaret Chen recounting Justin's statement about making his parents disappear, friends describing his obsession with money and his promises of future wealth, colleagues of James and Emily detailing normal parental boundaries that Justin had found intolerable forensic analysis, ballistics reports matching the bullets to the ammunition purchased on March 17th, forensic document examination of the fake ID showing sophisticated forgery, blood spatter analysis confirming the shooter's position at the foot of the bed, gunshot trajectory analysis consistent with a standing shooter, not someone acting in panic or self-defense. The combination of this evidence painted a picture so damning that even the most skeptical investigators had to acknowledge the truth. A 14-year-old boy had methodically planned and executed the murder of his parents over the course of weeks, motivated by nothing more than a desire for money and freedom from reasonable parental rules. As the investigation concluded, forensic psychologist Dr. Elizabeth Wong conducted a comprehensive evaluation of Justin Westerfield at the request of both prosecution and defense. Her findings were disturbing. Justin demonstrated what Dr. Wong termed significant personality abnormalities, including shallow affect, grandiose sense of self-worth, callousness toward others, and complete lack of genuine remorse. However, he showed no evidence of psychosis, thought disorder, or intellectual impairment. He understood right from wrong. He understood consequences. He simply didn't care about them in any meaningful emotional way. When I asked Justin if he felt remorse for killing his parents, Dr. Wong reported, he responded, "I guess I should have waited until I had my own place lined up first." That was a planning error. He was focused entirely on the logistical failure of his plan, not on the moral horror of his actions. Dr. Wong's assessment noted that Justin processed the murders through a purely practical lens. He showed frustration that his arrest had interrupted his plans to inherit his parents' money and move into a luxury condominium. He expressed annoyance at being tried as an adult, viewing it as unfair that he would face serious consequences. But nowhere in hours of evaluation did he demonstrate genuine empathy for his victims or understanding of the devastation he'd caused to his extended family. This is consistent with severe personality pathology, Dr. Wong concluded. Justin's emotional responses are fundamentally disconnected from the gravity of his actions. He relates to his parents' deaths as obstacles that interfered with his plans, not as human tragedies he caused. The Westerfield murders sent shockwaves through Kansas City's tight-knit law enforcement and social services communities. James had been a beloved officer, known for his community policing approach and his mentorship of younger cops. Emily had been equally respected in social services circles, known for her fierce advocacy for vulnerable children. The irony of Emily's death was particularly painful for her colleagues. She'd spent her career protecting children from dangerous family situations. She'd been trained to recognize warning signs of potential violence, yet she'd been killed by her own son, in her own home, unable to protect herself from the child she'd raised. Captain Michael Harrison, James's commanding officer, struggled to find words at a memorial gathering. James was the kind of officer who knew every kid on his beat by name. He believed in building relationships, in being part of the community, not just policing it. The fact that he was murdered by his own son, a kid he coached and mentored and loved unconditionally, it defies comprehension. The Kansas City Police Department organized a vigil outside the Brookside home 3 days after the murders, before Justin's arrest became public. Hundreds of officers stood in silent formation, their patrol cars lined up with lights flashing in tribute. Many openly wept. Some stood rigid, their grief manifesting as controlled fury at the violation of one of their own. When news broke that Justin had been arrested for the murders, the community's grief transformed into something more complex: shock mixed with horror, sympathy for the extended family tangled with rage at the betrayal. How could a child raised in a home dedicated to service and protection become capable of such calculated violence? The case forced uncomfortable conversations in schools, churches, and homes throughout Kansas City. Parents looked at their own teenagers with new wariness, wondering if normal adolescent rebellion could hide something darker. Teachers reconsidered how they interpreted concerning statements from students. The line between typical teenage drama and genuine danger suddenly seemed terrifyingly thin. The investigation into Justin Westerfield's crimes led to immediate policy changes across multiple institutions. Heartland Hunting Supplies, where Justin had purchased the ammunition, instituted what owner Victor Ramirez called the Westerfield Protocol. "We failed to catch a sophisticated fake ID," Ramirez explained to the media. "That failure contributed to 2 deaths. We won't let that happen again." The new protocol required digital verification of all IDs for ammunition purchases, regardless of how legitimate they appeared. Multiple employees had to authorize sales of certain calibers. The system flagged any purchases that seemed inconsistent with the buyer's profile, like someone allegedly in their 40s buying ammunition for the first time in years. Schools throughout the Kansas City area revised their threat assessment procedures. Margaret Chen, the counselor who'd heard Justin's statement about making his parents disappear, became an advocate for taking such comments more seriously. "I followed protocol," she explained in a training session for other counselors. "I reported it to his mother. But the system failed because we all, myself included, defaulted to assuming it was typical teenage hyperbole. We need better frameworks for distinguishing between normal venting and genuine threats." The Kansas City social services community also grappled with painful questions. Emily Westerfield had been an expert in recognizing troubled family dynamics, yet she'd apparently missed, or at least underestimated, the danger brewing in her own home. Her colleagues struggled with guilt, wondering if they should have recognized warning signs that Emily herself had missed. Emily was doing everything right, her supervisor insisted. She set appropriate boundaries. She maintained open communication. She sought advice when Justin's behavior concerned her. She'd even scheduled family therapy for the week after Easter. The problem wasn't her parenting. It was Justin's fundamental inability to process normal limits in a healthy way. Perhaps no one suffered more complicated grief than Martha and Richard Barnett, Emily's parents. They'd lost their only daughter to violence. They'd discovered that their beloved grandson was responsible for that violence, and they faced an impossible choice about how to relate to Justin going forward. "How do you love and hate the same person simultaneously?" Martha asked in a rare interview with a local journalist. "Justin is Emily's son. He's my grandson. I held him when he was born. I taught him to ride a bike, but he murdered my daughter. He murdered James. He took everything from us. The Barnetts attended every court hearing, sitting in the front row with James Westerfield's parents beside them. United in grief, they presented a powerful image of family shattered beyond repair. They provided victim impact statements. They advocated for justice for James and Emily. But they also struggled with questions that had no good answers. Should they visit Justin in juvenile detention? Should they maintain contact with him through letters? Did they have a duty to the grandson who destroyed their family, or did their loyalty belong entirely to their murdered daughter? "We've decided not to visit," Richard Barnett finally announced to family members. "Not now. Maybe not ever. We need to survive this ourselves." And maintaining a relationship with Justin, I don't know if we're strong enough for that. The psychological toll was visible. Martha aged years and months, her hair turning white, her face becoming gaunt. Richard threw himself into advocacy work, channeling his grief into pushing for better ammunition sale regulations and improved mental health screening for adolescents. They attended support groups for families of murder victims, though they often felt isolated even there. Most families weren't dealing with the additional trauma of the killer being their own grandchild. As the investigation concluded and prosecutors prepared for trial, one question continued to haunt everyone involved. Why? What transforms a teenager from a seemingly normal kid into someone capable of such calculated evil? The easy answer was that Justin was simply a bad seed, a fundamentally defective person who lacked normal human empathy. But that explanation satisfied no one, least of all the mental health professionals who evaluated him. Dr. Wong's psychological assessment noted that Justin showed traits consistent with antisocial personality disorder, though such diagnoses are rarely made in adolescents whose personalities are still developing. He demonstrated a pattern of disregarding the rights and feelings of others, a grandiose sense of self-importance, and an apparent inability to form genuine emotional attachments. Justin views other people, including his parents, as objects that either serve his needs or obstruct his desires, Dr. Wong wrote. He has a purely transactional relationship with humanity. His parents provided financial support and social standing, but they also imposed rules that limited his autonomy. When he calculated that he could access their resources without accepting their restrictions by killing them, he pursued that option with no more moral consideration than someone might show when choosing between two routes to the same destination. But that clinical description didn't explain the origin of such profound pathology. Justin had no documented history of childhood abuse or trauma. James and Emily Westerfield had been loving, engaged parents who'd provided stability, support, and appropriate guidance. By all accounts, Justin's early childhood had been happy and healthy. Sometimes, Dr. Wong concluded, we want there to be an explanation that makes sense, a clear cause and effect that would allow us to prevent similar cases in the future. But the uncomfortable truth is that some people simply lack the neurological or psychological capacity for normal empathy and moral reasoning. We don't fully understand why. Environmental factors matter, but so does inherent temperament. Justin Westerfield appears to be one of those rare individuals who would likely have developed these antisocial traits regardless of how he was raised. This conclusion was cold comfort to those seeking understanding. If good parenting couldn't prevent such an outcome, if love and structure and stability weren't sufficient protection, then no family was truly safe from this kind of tragedy. As Detective Anderson compiled his final case report, reviewing months of investigation and thousands of pages of evidence, he found himself returning again and again to that ammunition purchase on March 17th. That single transaction represented the moment when Justin Westerfield moved from fantasy to action. He'd been thinking about killing his parents for weeks, researching methods, weighing the benefits. But when he walked into Heartland Hunting Supplies wearing his father's jacket and carrying a fake ID, he crossed a threshold. He committed himself to murder. Everything that came after that purchase was inevitable, Anderson reflected in his report. Once Justin acquired the ammunition, the plan gained a momentum of its own. He'd invested too much effort in the preparation to back out. The fake ID, the practice run, the journal entries, Each step made the next step easier, building a psychological commitment to following through. The investigation had been thorough and successful. Every piece of evidence supported the prosecution's narrative. The confession was detailed and damning. The physical evidence was irrefutable. Justin Westerfield would face justice for his crimes. But Anderson took no satisfaction in the outcome. 2 dedicated public servants were dead. A 14-year-old would spend the rest of his life in prison. Grandparents faced the remainder of their years with grief and guilt, and the questions that haunted everyone involved. Questions about nature versus nurture, about adolescent brain development, about how society should respond when children commit adult crimes, remained largely unanswered. "This case will stay with me for the rest of my career," Anderson admitted to Martinez as they closed the file. "We did our job. We followed the evidence. We got justice for James and Emily. But I'll never understand how a kid raised with so many advantages could become so completely broken inside." Martinez nodded, her expression weary. She'd been having nightmares about the interrogation, about Justin's flat affect, as he described watching his mother bleed out. The ammunition purchase solved the case. But it doesn't explain the kid. Maybe nothing can. In the evidence room at Kansas City Police Headquarters, a shelf holds the physical remnants of the Westerfield investigation. The empty ammunition box sits in a clear plastic bag, the receipt still visible at the bottom. Next to it is the fake ID that fooled a young store clerk, the hunting rifle, tagged and cataloged, the journal with its chilling entries, Justin's phone and laptop, their digital secrets extracted and preserved. These objects tell a story of premeditation, calculation, and cold-blooded murder. They represent the transformation of thought into action, of resentment into violence, and they serve as a permanent reminder of how an ordinary Easter Sunday morning in a quiet Kansas City neighborhood became the scene of one of the most disturbing family murders in Missouri history. The case file itself runs to thousands of pages: witness statements, forensic reports, search warrant returns, psychological evaluations. But the core of the investigation can be traced back to a single moment: a crime scene technician reaching into an empty ammunition box and finding a crumpled receipt dated 3 weeks before the murders. That receipt was the key that unlocked everything else. It proved planning. It demonstrated intent. It connected Justin Westerfield directly to the murder weapon and definitively contradicted any claim that the killings were impulsive or unplanned. Foundational evidence, prosecutors would later call it, the single piece of proof that anchored every other element of the case. In the months following Justin's arrest, as the case moved through the judicial system toward trial, Kansas City slowly began to heal, or at least to process the trauma in healthier ways. The Westerfield home was eventually sold, the proceeds held in escrow pending resolution of the criminal case and determination of whether Justin could legally inherit from his victims. Memorial services for James and Emily drew hundreds of mourners, police officers in dress uniform, social workers carrying photos of Emily with the children she'd helped, neighbors who'd known the family for years. The eulogies painted a picture of 2 lives dedicated to service, cut short by senseless violence. No one mentioned Justin by name during the services. His absence was a painful void at the center of the gatherings. Some mourners had known him since infancy. They'd watched him grow, had celebrated his achievements, had considered him a promising young man with every advantage. Reconciling that image with the calculating killer revealed by the investigation proved impossible for many. The investigation itself became a case study in modern police work, the integration of physical evidence, digital forensics, behavioral analysis, and traditional detective work. Anderson and his team were commended for their thorough and professional handling of an emotionally charged case involving a fellow officer. But for Anderson, the commendations rang hollow. "We solved the case," he told his wife one evening, months after the arrest. "We followed every lead, documented every piece of evidence, built an airtight prosecution. But we didn't prevent it. That kid was planning this for weeks, showing warning signs, and no one, including his trained social worker mother, recognized the danger. That's the real failure here." His wife had no answer. There was no answer. Some tragedies can't be prevented, only survived by those left behind. Before the trial began, Detective Anderson conducted one final interview with Justin Westerfield, hoping to gain some insight that might explain the inexplicable. They sat across from each other in the same interrogation room where Justin had confessed months earlier. "Justin," Anderson began, "help me understand something. Your parents loved you. They provided for you. They wanted the best for you. How did you get from there to murdering them in their sleep?" Justin considered the question for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his answer was chillingly simple. "They were in the way. I wanted things they wouldn't give me, so I removed the obstacle." "But they were people," Anderson pressed. "Your parents. They changed your diapers, taught you to read, went to every baseball game. Didn't that mean anything?" Justin shrugged, genuinely seeming not to understand the question. "That was before. That didn't matter anymore. They stopped being useful and started being limiting. So the logical solution was to eliminate the limitation." The matter-of-fact way Justin described murdering his parents as a logical solution to a problem encapsulated everything that made the case so disturbing. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. This was practical, calculated, rational, within its own twisted logic. Anderson left the interview room feeling more disturbed than when he'd entered. Sometimes getting answers only deepened the mystery. As the case file was sealed and prepared for trial, one truth became undeniable. The ammunition purchase on March 17th, 2022, was the linchpin that held the entire investigation together. Everything radiated from that single transaction. The fake ID proved premeditation and consciousness of guilt. Justin knew what he was planning was wrong, so he took elaborate steps to hide his identity. The 3-week gap between purchase and murders demonstrated extended planning and deliberation, not impulsive action. The specific selection of ammunition designed for maximum lethality showed purposeful choice and deadly intent. The location of the purchase, the timing, the use of his father's credit card, every detail told a story of calculated planning by a teenager whose desire for money and freedom overcame any bond of love or loyalty to the parents who'd raised him. The ammunition purchase was more than just evidence, prosecutor Victoria Palmer would later write in her case summary. It was the moment when Justin Westerfield committed himself to murder. Once he walked out of that store with those bullets in his pocket, everything that followed became almost inevitable. That purchase transformed him from someone thinking about killing his parents into someone actively preparing to do so. And 3 weeks later, on Easter Sunday morning, he completed the plan he'd set in motion when he bought that ammunition. The investigation had been successful because the detectives had followed the evidence methodically and professionally, never letting their emotional connections to the victims cloud their judgment. But it had been possible only because Justin had made critical mistakes, keeping the receipt, leaving digital footprints, burying his journal too shallowly, waiting too long to call 911. A smarter killer would have gotten away with it, Martinez observed as they reviewed the completed file. If he'd paid cash, destroyed the fake ID, hidden his online research better, acted sooner, there might not have been enough evidence to charge him. Anderson nodded grimly. Thank God for small blessings. At least James and Emily got justice, even if they can't appreciate it. In the Kansas City Police Department's precinct meeting room, officers gather monthly for briefings and trainings. James Westerfield's old seat, third row on the left by the window, remains conspicuously empty at these gatherings. No one sits there. No one needs to say why. At Jackson County Family Services, Emily Westerfield's old office has been converted into a resource library named in her honor. Social workers studying child trauma and family intervention can access materials Emily collected over her career. Her colleagues keep fresh flowers on the small memorial shelf displaying her photo. In the evidence room, the artifacts of the investigation gather dust in their plastic bags and sealed boxes. The empty ammunition box, the fake ID, the journal, the rifle. Physical proof of one teenager's descent into calculated evil and his parents' tragic fate. And in a maximum security facility, serving a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Justin Westerfield lives with the consequences of the choices he made that March day when he decided to purchase ammunition for murder. Whether he experiences remorse, regret, or any human emotion beyond self-interest remains unclear. The investigation is closed. Justice has been served. But the questions linger, haunting everyone touched by this case. How does a child become a killer? How do parents protect themselves from their own children? How does a community heal from such a profound betrayal? Detective Ryan Anderson retired 5 years after the Westerfield case, unable to shake the images and insights from that investigation. In his final report, he wrote, "We solved this case because Justin Westerfield made mistakes, but we failed to prevent it because no one, not his parents, not his school, not the system, recognized the danger in time." That's the real tragedy. Two good people died because we didn't see the monster growing in their own home until it was too late. The empty ammunition box remains in evidence, a silent testament to the moment when murderous thoughts became deadly action, when a teenager's resentment transformed into a plan, when a plan became preparation, when preparation became execution. On Easter Sunday morning, while families across Kansas City searched for hidden eggs and celebrated renewal, James and Emily Westerfield drew their last breaths at the hands of the son they'd loved unconditionally. The investigation that followed brought answers and justice, but it could never bring them back. The end.